Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Lore of League of Legends. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on an eternal spirit who possesses a cold-burning hatred for betrayers, deceivers, and traitors. Without further ado, I present to you the lore of Kalista, the Spear of Vengeance. Enjoy. As an undying entity, Kalista is a being that can be invoked by others to exact vengeance, but at a great cost. The cost of the supplicant's soul is to be bound to Kalista for all eternity. Here is one such tale. The Sword Wife stood amid the burnt-out ruin of her home. Everyone and everything that mattered to her was gone. She was filled with fathomless grief, but more so than that, she was filled with hate, and it was hate that now all but compelled her. She saw again the smile on his face as he gave the order. He was meant to be their protector, but he'd spat upon his vows. Hers was not the only family shattered by the Oathbreaker. She wanted nothing more than to plant her sword in his chest and watch the life drain from his eyes. But she knew she would never be able to get close enough to him, for he was guarded day and night, and she was just one warrior. She would never be able to fight her way through his battalion alone, and such a death would serve no purpose. She knew what she must do, and took a shuddering breath, for from this there was no turning back. A crude effigy of a man made from sticks and twine lay upon a fire-blackened dresser, its body wrapped in a scrap of cloth that had been torn from the betrayer by her now-dead husband. Alongside, she had also placed a hammer and 3 rusted nails. She gathered everything and moved to the threshold. The door itself was gone, smashed to splinters in the attack. Beyond it lay empty, darkened fields lit only by moonlight. Reaching up, the Sword Wife pressed the effigy to the hardwood lintel and began to speak. "I invoke thee, Lady of Vengeance." Her voice was low, trembling with the depth of her fury. "From beyond the veil hear my plea. Come forth and let justice be done." The Sword Wife readied the hammer and the first of the 3 nails. "I named my betrayer once," she said, speaking his name aloud. And as she did so, she placed the tip of the first nail to the chest of the stick figure, and with a single strike, hammered it in deep, pinning it to the hardwood door frame. She named him a second time, hammering the second nail alongside the first. Her gaze dropped and she jolted in shock. Ahead she saw a dark figure standing out in the moonlit field, 100 yards in the distance. It was utterly motionless, and breathing quicker, she returned her attention to the unfinished task before her. For the 3rd time she named him, the name of the murderer of her husband and children, before hammering the final nail into the effigy. In an instant, an ancient spirit of vengeance stood before her, filling the doorway, and the Sword Wife staggered back, gasping involuntarily. The otherworldly being was clad in archaic armour, her flesh translucent and glowing with spectral light, black mist coiling around her like a living shroud. With a squeal of tortured and ancient metal, the spectral figure drew forth the blackened spear protruding from her breastplate, the ancient weapon that had once ended her own life. She threw it to the ground before the woman. No words were spoken, and there was no need. The Sword Wife knew what was being offered to her: vengeance, and knew of the terrible cost it required: her soul. The spirit watched on, her face impassive and her eyes burning with an unrelenting cold fury. The Sword Wife picked up the weapon, pledging herself to vengeance, and reversed the spear, aiming the tip inward towards the heart. For a moment she paused. Her husband would have pleaded with her to turn away from this path, begging her not to condemn her soul with this course of action. The woman's eyes narrowed as she thought of her husband lying dead, cut down by swords and axes. She thought again of her children sprawled upon the ground, and her resolve suddenly hardened like a cold stone in her heart. Her grip tightened, and she rammed the spear into her chest, driving it in deep. She dropped to her knees, her eyes widened. The only reaction was blood bubbling to her lips where she tried to speak. As the last of the lifeblood ran from her body, the shade of the sword wife climbed to her feet. She looked down at her own corpse lying dead in a glowing pool of blood upon the floor. The shade's expression hardened and a ghostly sword appeared in her hand. An ethereal tether, little more than a wisp of light, now linked the newly formed shade to the avenging spirit she had summoned. Through their bond, the sword wife saw her differently, glimpsing the noble warrior she had been in life, tall and proud, her armour gleaming, her posture confident yet without arrogance. A born leader and a born soldier. This was a commander the sword wife would have willingly bled for. "Your cause is our cause," said Kalista, the spear of vengeance. Her voice was grave cold. "We walk the path of vengeance as one now." And with that, the avenging spirit and the shade of the sword wife stepped into the darkness, disappearing into the night. And that's all I've got for you this time around. Let me know what you thought of the video by hitting that like button and leaving your feedback in the comment section below. Don't forget, any champion you may have missed can be found by clicking the annotation at the top of the screen that will take you to the Lore of League of Legends playlist. Thanks for watching everyone, and as always, I'll see you next time.